And now it's Deborah Kobylt Live.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today on Deborah Kobylt Live. And we are sponsored by Luna. We're going to talk a little bit about Luna later on in our program. But please welcome Wendie Colter. She wrote this terrific book, Essentials of Medical Intuition, a Visionary Path to Wellness. And it's not just for all of us that are watching right now, right? What I love about this book that Wendie wrote, it is also for many in the medical wellness community, and it's also been footnoted by many a university. We're going to talk about that. Wendie, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's wonderful, and it's a very well thought out book. I enjoyed reading it. Talk to me about the book. Why did you write it, and what is it about? Who's our target audience?
Well, I wrote the book for a number of reasons. As a professional medical intuitive and as a teacher of medical actually is, what it can bring to healthcare, what it can bring to clients and patients and medical professionals. So I saw that there was a need for this. And we can talk about the research that I did also that kind of goes along with this. But I wrote it for a broad audience. So it's not only for healthcare professionals who want to know here, but also for everyone to just find out what this stuff is, right? What does a medical intuitive do? Why do they do it? What can they see? What can they discern? How can it help me in my health journey? There's a lot kind of a broad scope there.
How did you get into medical intuition? And quite frankly, what is it?
So sometimes it's a little easier to talk about what it isn't first. And what it
Okay.
isn't, yeah, what it is an assessment skill. So as a medical intuitive, what I do is I assess the physical body and the biofield. Now that's the auric field and the chakra system, the energy of the body, as well as the anatomy and physiology of the body using intuitive skills. And what can be discerned is quite remarkable. And in the medical world, they call that root cause. We go a little further with that, meaning we're going to look into the life history, see what the energy shows us, and see what can be very helpful or useful for our clients in, kind of finding out what's going on for them in their bodies.
If I were to come and talk to you, how would you speak back to me in terms of medical intuition and what you would be picking up?
Intuitives work and the way I teach
Sure.
my process. So I'll just give it to you from my perspective. But what we
Sure.
hear from most medical intuitives and I'll tell you a little bit about how we've done a study on that too, how do people do their work, is that people use their intuition, and some medical intuitives don't even work with the person there. I like to have the person there to interact with.
Yeah.
But what we're doing is we're looking or discerning or using all these different intuitive abilities to have essentially a conversation with the body, what the body wants. And the premise there is that the body and the energy field, the body holds information, spiritual information, mental information. And that's a much broader conversation than you would get in a 15-minute consult with your medical professional. It's just a whole different way of working with the body.
Is this something that doctors, physicians, surgeons are doing more of? Because often when I, will show up right in a doctor's office, and this doesn't necessarily work for me, by the way. There's the notepad, and they're writing down the symptoms, and they're like, okay, X-ray, this, and I feel like they don't dive deeper into what else might it be or causing it. Do you know what I mean? Like, how do you get the medical professionals to get into this more? Does that make sense? I mean, it needs to be taught, right?
Without question. And I was just going to go there. I've been very privileged to teach at some of the premier integrative health organizations in the country. Andrew Weil Center for Integrative Medicine in Tucson. I was part of their program for fourth-year medical students and residents to present on medical intuition. And I got to tell you, those young doctors, they get it. They understand that there's something more than just, a mechanical view of the body. And the more the doctors understand this, the more the medical world understands this. I also spoke at UCLA Center for East-West Medicine, and that's a pretty major university and School of Medicine there, and they understood. It resonates when I speak to healthcare professionals at conferences. I have to tell you, it resonates because everybody has had that experience of having a gut feeling or a hunch or an intuition that something's going on. And the physicians that listen to their patients' hunches, those are the ones that people recommend. You got to go see my doctor. There's something, they have that extra something, Well, what is that extra something? It's a kind of an intuition that medical intuition as a skill set can actually expand on.
How did you get into this line of work?
I started out as an energy healer, as many people in the biofield practices world do. And in my energy healing practice, I found that I was able to see into the physical body in the biofield. I was just able to kind of get a visual. I use the visual sense of intuition, and I could see, all the stuff going on in the anatomy and the physiology. And I could also see the life history. Like there was just a lot of information there. And I noticed that this was coming as like hits, right? And a lot of energy healers have that. Energy healing professionals, they understand the idea of hits, and you probably do too. These intuitive flashes, right? So these things would come to me in a flash. And one of the things I was curious about is when a client would come back after having a great healing session, would come back with the same issue still unresolved. And I found that really curious. And I wanted to know why, right? Why is somebody not able to release something more thoroughly when we're in our session together? When we're in our session together, they might, but then they come back with it. So I started offering my clients just essentially a scan. Do you mind if I just sit here and just look and see what's going on first? And people love that idea. And I found that the information I was able to discern with this skill of in-depth querying, essentially, of their body and biofield was so powerful and profound for them that I starting with that. And because it gave them so much more information. And then when we went into a healing session, wow, they were releasing things left and right. It was really kind of amazing.
Wow.
Just hearing it, right, made a big difference.
Is this something you can get a vibe from, a feeling from, let's say, talking to me by Zoom? Like, I'm picking this up from you, Deborah, or no? Because if the answer is yes, I'm going to hold you to it and say, what you picking up, girl? Because I need to know what's going on. So what's the answer for that one?
Well, the answer for that one is twofold. Number one, can we? Sure. Should we? Probably not, because there's ethics involved, right? When I was first starting out with all of this, even when I was a kid, my mother used to tell me, I used to walk into a room full of strangers or whatever, excuse me. And I used to say, oh, that person's not feeling well. I could kind of discern a little bit intuitively, how people were doing. And that's a bit like being a sponge, isn't it? It's a bit like not having a boundary. It's not a bit, it's not having an energetic boundary. So one of the skills that I teach, because I feel that it's an ethical perspective for an intuitive, is to have an ethical boundary so that I'm not soaking in and, my antennae are not always tuned. Now, when I get into the space of looking at your energy, well, absolutely, I'm tuned in without question.
Really? So you could read my energy a little bit as we're talking, that type of thing?
If that was the agreement, if that was, I have a consent form that clients sign, I wouldn't do it live on the air. It wouldn't happen that way. That, to me, that's the unethical part. This is your personal information. I don't think you want that, given to the world. And
no, but I got to say, I really appreciate that, because there have been times I've interviewed people and they're like, I'm picking up this, I'm picking up that. I'm thinking, all right, I get it, because I could pick up things from people too. But you go about 10 steps deeper. I mean, you work with the medical profession. You are, you're someone who is well respected in the medical community and within the university community. So I actually really appreciate that answer, that it's like, no, I hold back because I need to know my information. And I think that's really valuable. And that's valuable to the people that you work with too, because they know that that line of ethics is actually fantastic. We're going to go to a commercial with Luna. And when I come back, I want to talk a little bit about how do you teach this to the community and to the professionals? Can we talk about that?
Absolutely.
Welcome
great.
to
So now
Luna,
we're gonna
where the
go
mission is to elevate rest with beautifully designed sleepwear made of organic Pima and cozy cotton silks. Known for pioneering washable silks, everything Luna designs is to improve your rest with their state-of-the-art products such as no-twist waistbands, strategic ventilation, and stay-put sleeves. Luna was founded by LA native Ashley Merrill, and the company prides itself on paying attention to every detail. Check out these beautiful products. They're so comfy, you'll finally want to toss out your old t-shirt sleepwear and put yourself into one of these beautiful sleep sets and robes, and there's so much more. Go to luna.co and use Deborah20 as your discount code. That's DEBORAH20 at luna.co and join the Better Rest Revolution.
Well, thank you so much to Luna, and thank you for allowing us to play that commercial about Luna. Let's talk a little bit about developing intuition and how you teach this. All right. And then after that, I want to talk about some real hard, concrete examples of this that are in the book, that throughout the book.
Yes. So in my main program, which is the medical intuitive training, it's in 2 levels. And each level covers a different aspect of intuitive practice. The first level is about looking at the biofield. So we're going to look at the auric field, the aura, the chakra system, belief systems, things that can clog up the auric field, and how it impacts the, really the energy of someone. And the second level is about actual medical, what I call, medical intuition, the nuts and bolts, meaning we learn how to look into the body, we learn how to read the anatomy and physiology, and that's very detailed. We go through every body system. And then also the life history. Now, I'll back up a little. In the anatomy and physiology part, we're also reading the cellular structure, right? And so we can look at that. We can do all kinds of things in that perspective. Then when we read life history, what we're looking at is where in someone's energy could have an event occurred that could have manifested in a present life circumstance of health imbalance. And that is what I call, the underlying drivers or the root causes of physical imbalance. And, in the integrative health world, the word root cause, the idea of root cause is very big right now. But from my perspective, medical intuitives go so much further with the concept of root cause and the practice of looking for it. Really, there's not a context for it in Western medicine perspective.
But you're often called upon, right, by doctors to come in during a case and help them to uncover what might be going on. Is that true?
Yes, and many medical intuitives are. There's an organization that is just forming. We're launching this month, called the National Organization for Medical Intuition, and our aim is to bring the understanding of medical intuition into the healthcare community. And the medical intuitives that are on the board, myself included, are all, for the most part, very, very experienced medical intuitives who work with healthcare providers as well as, solo practitioners. One of the things we did was when we were first forming is we wanted to know what medical intuitives did out there, how they worked, what they brought, and how they did their jobs and who they did their jobs with. So we found out, I'll just give you this data real quick, is that of the medical intuitives we surveyed, 82% reported that they assist healthcare providers, licensed healthcare providers, with medical intuition, very much like what I do. Doctor will call me on behalf of their patient. I'll work with them and we'll give them information that they can use. That's the assisting part, right? The 86% of those medical intuitives we surveyed said that they receive referrals from licensed healthcare professionals for medical intuition for their patients. That means that a patient of theirs will call me and I'll set up a separate session and work with them that way. And both those ways are wonderful. And there's an even more, I would say, forward-thinking way that's presented in the book. In chapter 5, I interviewed a wonderful integrative medicine doctor in New York who works with, she brings a medical intuitive into her exam room with the patient. And patient, doctor, and medical intuitive work together. Isn't that spectacular? It's wonderful.
Yeah. But all three have to be on board, right?
Oh, of
Because
course, of course.
so many patients who, if you will, are a little old school.
Oh,
They
sure.
just want to go there and get the prescription written out, like, take 2 aspirin, call me in the morning kind of a thing, right?
Yeah,
And they're
course.
going to be like, what do you mean? What's a medical intuitive? Like, it has to be introduced. But same with certain doctors, for lack of a better term, who are also a little old school in their practices, right? And they might be like,
Yeah.
well, what do you mean? It's not written here. I do believe they have to be trained, some of them, to feel what's here too. I do
without
believe that,
question.
because
Yeah.
intuition is really the root of everything, right? It's the root for studying and curiosity and the possibility of what might be. I think this is critical in the entire medical community. Give us a couple of other examples. I know that you and I spoke also. It's a couple chapters. You talked chapter 9, also chapter 2 that we had brought up. I believe her name was Claudia, right? Could you tell our audience about Claudia? What her situation was and how this helped her.
Absolutely. That case study really is a cornerstone of how I use medical intuition, how it works, what I see. So it's a good example of the process. So Claudia was a client, middle-aged, 40-something, wonderful businesswoman who had a persistent case of tendonitis in her wrist. And, tendonitis can be persistent. It can last a long time, especially if it's a part of your body you use a lot, right? So she still wanted me to look. And so when I mentioned that I look at the anatomy and the physiology first. So here's what I saw when I looked at her wrist using my skill set. I saw the inflamed tendons. That was clear. Underneath the tendons, what I saw was a bone fracture it looked old. It looked like an old healed fracture. And I also saw what looked like a cloud around her wrist of grief and emotion. And that's a good first look, right? Now, the next thing I do is this conversation between me and the client's body, like, okay, show me where this began. And what it showed me was what I would call sort of a visual of a little movie of someone's life, right? Just a little movie popped up and I got to see where this thing began. And what it showed me was her at about age 20, playing tennis with her boyfriend. She swung her racket and she fell on the court and broke that wrist. And that's where that healed bone fracture had originated. That's where it happened. The next thing her wrist showed me was her and her boyfriend in the ER, and him breaking up with her right there in the ER, right?
Oh.
Right in the hospital. So at that moment, so what her wrist was showing me that it was holding on. Remember I said the body holds on to things? It was holding on to the physical trauma of the fracture, but also the emotional trauma of the breakup. And it was showing up for her in this way. Now, what was really interesting is she remembered that. It was like, oh, I remember that. And then she said she had one of those wonderful aha moments that clients sometimes have. She said, in the present, I'm going through a breakup with my partner who she'd been with for over 10 years. And when did that breakup happen? Just before the tendonitis flared up.
Wow.
So her body was basically giving her this message that this unresolved trauma of grief and physical altogether had just triggered again in this new kind of a similar sort of heartbreak situation. Now, that's fascinating on its own, but her wrist actually wasn't done showing me images from her life. So it showed me another image of her at 5 years old. And at 5 years old, she was in a dark closet surrounded by clothes. She was holding that same wrist up for protection in front of her face, and a cane was striking her right there. And it was wielded by a woman, and there was a lot of emotional and physical trauma going on. Now, before my client had another realization, and she said, well, I know what that is. She said, my mother was mentally ill, and she used to beat me with her cane and lock me in a closet. Terrible trauma for this woman. But what her wrist was indicating was there was a lifetime of trauma and pain stored right here in that spot in her body. Pretty interesting. Now, the next, go ahead.
Well, I have so many questions about this. You were picking this up?
I was seeing
she had
it.
told you a little
No,
you
nothing.
were literally seeing this.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
These
so
are,
you're telling her that, hang on a minute, you're telling her this. I would have been flipped out, like, whoa, you really were picking this up. You were telling it to her.
yes.
Then what happened? This
Then what
realization,
happened?
did it help her? No, but did it help her to
Yes.
cure, because she realized this?
Yes.
Wow.
So just to finish the process of medical intuition, my next job is to ask the body what it wants and needs to heal. I mean, that's a big part of it. We can't just leave people with the data. They need to know how to move forward in their health journey. So I'm talking to the body, and what it was showing me was all these incidents that she had a memory of, but our memories don't really match sometimes the body's perspective. The body had this very clear line delineated from age 5 to age now, and it showed where those puzzle pieces link together. Now, we don't put those puzzle pieces together logically. It doesn't make sense to our logical minds. But remember, our bodies have their own conscious awareness. So that's the message I want to get across. Now, when I ask the body, what do you want and need to heal? That's another piece of information. What her body showed me was, there were some stress issues that were leading to gut digestion. She wasn't digesting very well. Her sleep was really impacted by this. She felt really dragged down. Many of her systems were kind of low functioning at the time because of all of that stress and emotion. And that's what I imparted to her. That's what it asked for, a few things, but nothing really major. It really looked like this needed to be processed emotionally. So,
wow.
2 days later.
Now, go ahead.
2 days later, she called me and she said, it's gone. I'm like, well, what happened? She said her wrist, the pain had completely gone away. It was back to normal. But what was most potent for her was not that the pain went away or the tendonitis was gone, but that she felt like she was able to deal with the emotional impact of her current breakup, which is what she was really resisting the whole time. And so this is what the body does. This is very much a typical session.
Wow. Well, you talk about that quite a bit in the book. It's the mind, it's the body, it's the soul. We all work together. It's not just the wrist, right? There's so much more to the wrist. Yes. And we often overlook it as we go about our busy lives and our busy days. We just overlook it. It's a break. And we don't really get into what this really gives us, food for thought, mind for thought, whatever you want to call it. That's an incredible story, really. I'm almost flabbergasted. Yeah. Go ahead.
And the truth is that is a typical kind of session that you would have with me or any of my graduates, because this is the method that I teach. And it works. What can I say? People really enjoy it. We get a lot of very positive feedback. In fact, if you don't mind me segueing a little bit, I'd be happy to talk about the research that we did on this. Is that okay?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm so interested in it. Please continue.
Well, for me, I'm a very curious person. This is sort of how I got into all this. I want to know, how this happens, how you do this, what is the body trying to say? All these questions. And one of the things I did before I wrote the book, actually quite a few years ago, is I looked into the research on medical intuition. There is not a lot out there. Now, there's a long history of it. It goes back almost 200, actually about 200 years in recorded history, where people were able to actually see visually into the body. It's pretty fascinating stuff. It's through the 1800s.
Well, I'm sure even way further beyond that too, right?
Yeah. Well, what we're talking there is the history of
recorded
energy, practices goes since the dawn of humans. But in terms of recorded information in the medical and scientific world, it can be traced back to the late 1700s, early 1800s. Now, that was great, and that was fun to read and write about. In modern history, very little research, some mostly inconclusive, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But I wanted to see when the last study was done, and it was 20 years ago, really, and over 20 years ago, So I thought, well, why can't we contribute to the medical literature? All of my graduates are reading like gangbusters. We know that the clients are responding. Why don't we just do some kind of, you know, exploratory research? And so I connected with some of my colleagues down in San Diego at the University of San Diego School of Medicine. And this survey was created for 5 of my medical intuitive program graduates. And we ended up with 67 people from the community who wanted to work with us, some of whom were patients at UCSD Medical Center. And just like I mentioned earlier, these were blinded sessions. We know nothing. We don't do any health intake. We don't have any access to medical records. And we don't have a conversation with our clients. We just take a look, right? We say what we see. So that process was terrific. And this is an eyes closed process. So we're not even getting visual cues from someone, like no body language, none of that. All right. So we came out with some phenomenal results. And we found that the participants rated the medical intuitives as 94% accurate in the location and evaluation assessment of their primary health issue. We also had a 98% accuracy in describing life experience that might have led or, was corroborated or understood could have led to these health issues. So there was a connection there, 98% accuracy and description of life history. We also got 94% consistency with a known medical diagnosis, meaning about half of the participants knew they had a diagnosis from their doctor. They didn't tell us, but they said that the medical intuitive was 94% consistent with that.
Wow.
These are unheard of numbers, I just have to say. And that research, and there's more to it, was published in the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine, which is a peer-reviewed medical journal. It was published in 2020, and we're so proud of that data because even though it is survey data, which isn't exactly gold standard randomized control trial, it's still valid data, and it's now leading
very
us,
valid,
it's leading us to more studies where we hope to have access to medical records and work directly with doctors, and we're working on that now.
Now, for students who want to study with you, would that be somebody like me with very little background in training, or do you work primarily and teach people in the field who work in the medical wellness field? Go ahead.
Yes, I'm sorry to interrupt. Yes, my program is designed for wellness professionals, and wellness professionals means anyone with a professional wellness practice, from health coaching to massage therapy to nursing to physicians. I teach a lot of MDs and RNs, and it just runs the gamut. Mental health care as well, psychologists and things like that. So it's geared to that demographic. However, I also have a workshop that is open to everyone. And this workshop is to learn how to use these medical intuitive techniques on yourself so that you can have that mind-body connection. We want to talk to our liver, right? We want to talk to our big toe. We want to hear what it has to say. So that's a workshop called Medical Intuition for Healing. And that's going to be coming out as a self-study program, hopefully by the end of this year or early next year.
Wow, that's something I'm interested in as well. I think that's fantastic because very often I feel like something's not right. I don't really want to go to the doctor because they're going to say, you're fine, your tests are fine, go home. In which case I'm thinking, no, there's something not quite right. So gosh, this is very valuable for those of us who feel like there's something there, but we don't quite have the proof. So to be able to tap into that medical intuition is everything. Gosh, before I let you go, any nuggets that you want to share, anything else I should say, because you've shared a lot with our audience that you want to make sure that they know? And by the way, make sure you pick up the book, The Essentials of Medical Intuition. It's a great book, easy to read. I always like that. Easy to read, easy to pick up, thumb through, go from chapter to chapter as you choose. But anything you'd like to share before we part ways here?
Anybody interested in learning more, please go to the website. It's thepracticalpath.com. And there's a lot of information there. We're on Facebook, like us on Facebook, like us on Instagram. We're on LinkedIn. We're all over the place. And we're very happy to offer as much information as we can to both the public and to the healthcare world. I will say on the website, there are free guided meditations that anyone can listen to learn how to work with their own energy. And that to me is where we start. If we want to learn how to listen to our bodies, we've got to pay attention to our energy. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like we've gotten so far away from that in this society. And I think people are very interested in getting back to that. Listen to our own, and not just what a bunch of experts are saying who have massive degrees, but listen to the intuition from within, right? That so many people have done, to your point, for hundreds and before that, thousands of years. So I think this is very, very valuable. Gosh, I'm just so thrilled to have talked to you, Wendie Colter, Colter. I'm spelling that. So if you go to her website, you'll know. And it's Wendie. We'll put that in all of our social media comments too, because our show is on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. So you can find this full interview with Wendie there, in addition to all of our audio platforms as well. It's just been really a delight to have you. And some of the stories in this book, you guys, she only just told us one or two. You got to get the book to hear some of the others, because it's outstanding what you've been able to do, Wendie. Sort of like an aha, my mouth would drop when I read about a lot of this. So thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate it. Any place other than the website, are you going to be giving any talks or anything else that I could plug?
Yes, actually, all of that is on the website. There's an
That's
event,
on there too.
yeah, and everything coming up. I've got to update it. Lots coming up. I speak at conferences all the time, and there's a lot of really fun things people can tap into as well. And if anyone wants to contact us, just use the website contact form. Happy to give anyone any more information.
Yeah, and please pick up the book too, The Essentials of Medical Intuition. Thank you again, Wendie, and thanks to our audience for joining us, and thank you to Luna for sponsoring us. And this is Deborah Kobylt Live. I'm Deborah Zara Kobylt, and we will see you next time. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.